We're here today at one of my favorite places on earth to talk about tips for the older hiker. Grand Canyon is my favorite place to hike. And let's get something straight in the beginning. If you expect to watch a video that is a celebration of the joys of aging, you might as well turn this off now. What I want to do is do an honest video about the accommodations necessary to keep your hiking well into your senior years. When I was young, we used to have a multi-story home, and as a kid we would try to jump from the top stair to the landing, which was halfway down the stairs, and it was a great game. Later in life, I would be in a hurry and I would take stairs 2 at a time with no problem at all. Now that I'm in my mid-60s, I put my hand on the handrail and I go down 1 stair at a time, very carefully. And I'm sure if you ask yourself and you consider how it's affected you, you'll say you're doing the same. This video will be divided into 2 parts. The first part is kind of philosophical in nature, and the second part is practical tips. I understand, and I'm new to YouTube, that the way to keep people viewing YouTube is punch them in the face. The traditional way to do it would be to build building blocks coming to your strongest point at the end. And since I'm talking to the older hiker, and I assume I'm talking to older people, I'm going to do it that way. So I hope you'll view the whole video, stick with me, and I think it may be worth it in the end. One of the advantages to being an experienced hiker is the pre-hike hike. I'm taking a look from trail view at the Bright Angel Trail that I will hike down tomorrow. I've already gone down the trail a little bit, talked to hikers, found out about trail conditions and availability of water. I'll be up at 2, on the trail at 4, heading down to the river located in that crevasse that you can see in the center of the canyon. I'm up early to get started on the hike. And I haven't said this part out loud yet, but one of my sayings is, there's no substitute for experience. And to put that into the imperative and as a tip for the older hiker, it is, use your experience. And here's an example of that. The weather forecast said it would be 38 degrees this morning. I've learned to bring along a temperature sensor, and it turns out outside of the cabin I'm staying in, it is 51 degrees. Having this knowledge will make me better dressed for the hike. Another saying I have is, the older I get, the slower I get. When I used to work, I used to be up, have breakfast, and be out of the house within an hour. It typically takes me about 2 hours now, which is one of the reasons for the early start. But that includes having breakfast, showering, shaving, stretching, and doing a little bit brief bout of meditation as well. So one of the accommodations I've made for aging is giving myself a little bit of extra time. Another example of no substitute for experience is all of the preparations that I've made. I'm staying in a single cabin here so I can speak in a normal voice and not worry about worrying my neighbors. I've brought along with me a coffee maker so I don't fiddle making single cups of coffee in the morning. I've got a nice cup of coffee and I'm ready to start. I've set up in advance. The hiking poles are set for the hike for a downhill. My shoes, socks, and bug spray are ready to go as I get dressed. There is no substitute for experience, and as an older hiker, use your experience. The second point I want to make, and the second tip for the older hiker, is the secret weapon of the early hiker is the early start, and that dovetails with the no substitute for experience. I'll be on the trail before 4 a.m. I'll get to see the sunrise in the canyon. I'll have opportunity for solitude on the trail, an opportunity to take rest breaks, an opportunity to hear the first call of the canyon wren, one of my favorite things to hear as I hike in the canyon. An inexperienced hiker might be driving up from Flagstaff, taking an hour and a half to get here, or even if that hiker stayed on the rim, if they didn't know to bring their breakfast, they might be waiting for the restaurants to open. By the time they hit the trail, I'll be hours into my hike. First 2 tips, use your experience and use the secret weapon of the older hiker, the early start. I'm all suited up and ready to go, but I thought I would make a couple of more points. The first one is this. I have a saying, when you're old, don't do anything new. And let me adapt that to hiking and say, when you hike, don't do anything new. I don't mean you should always repeat the same thing and there's always room for new adventures, but on the hike, don't wear new clothing, certainly don't wear new shoes. For breakfast, don't try something new. Don't experiment with a new coffee that might have twice as much caffeine and make your head explode. Don't try a new electrolyte mix on the trail that may or may not agree with your stomach. And I come about this kind of through the school of hard knocks. I remember one time in my early hiking days, I went out to dinner and had some spicy noodles, and the results the next day were inconvenient, let's say. Don't try new food, and wear comfortable and worn clothing. As I age, my skin becomes more and more sensitive. Sometimes new clothing feels like sandpaper. You don't want to find out halfway through a hike that you're wearing sandpaper instead of comfortable clothes. The point being, when you do your hike, don't do anything new. And finally, this just came up by coincidence. I like to hike wearing less than I need at Grand Canyon because the temperatures increase quickly. But staying in the room last night, there were 3 waves of rain that came through. So instead of just wearing shorts and a t-shirt this morning, I put on a second layer in case it rains, this wool layer, and I figured instead of just carrying it, I'd wear it and be toasty warm in the morning. And the point that I'm trying to make is, when in doubt, take the conservative route. And that is a tip for the older hiker. You have tons of experience, be prepared. You always go out hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. And it will do you well along the trail. Finally, I'm set up with a dual headlight setup, one on the head, one on the waist, gives me stereoscopic lighting. And that is an accommodation for the aging process. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Having the 2 lights gives me better depth perception. Additionally, there's an element of redundancy. If one of the lights goes out, I'll still have one light working. Once again, when in doubt, take the conservative route. Let's hit the trail. Whoops. One of the good things about the early start, and an accommodation of the aging process as well, is when you're alone on the trail, you have plenty of opportunity for rest stops. One time, out of academic interest, I counted how many I took, and between the coffee and my age, it was into the double digits. Once again, this is one of the accommodations of the aging process. Get an early start, get a start when the trail is empty, and take your time. At least you're out here doing it. 3 miles in on the hike, I love the solitude on the trail. When the sun hits the canyon walls and the monuments, it's enormously peaceful. Another tip is to be a friendly presence on the trail. Always greet people warmly, have a conversation, offer information and seek information. I've learned all sorts of interesting things that way. One time, talking to a British family, they told me the water was off at Bright Angel Campground, where I was planning to water up for a trip up Kaibab Trail. You can find out all sorts of things. Also, when you smile and when you're friendly, people ask questions, people ask for help, and you make friends. Part of the interesting dynamic of the hike is meeting people. I've met people from all over the world and heard interesting stories. It's part of the pleasure of the hike. So, tip, be a friendly presence on the trail. Break time, I found natural foods work best. As we proceed down the trail, here's another tip. Don't compete with other hikers and don't compete with your younger self. I am probably one of the world's slowest downhill hikers. Various injuries and problems make me extraordinarily slow, and it can be frustrating. But I also tell myself, at least I'm out here. I'm out here doing it, and very many people are not. So that's something to be proud of. The fact that I'm slower than I used to be is a reality. So many of the things that I'm talking about now that I think about it is accommodation of the process of aging. Accommodations that allow you to keep doing what you love, to keep you hiking. Here's another tip. Understand that other people may not see you as you see yourself. When I was a young man, I had the presence to ask my mother how old she pictured herself as being, and she told me 21, which was fairly shocking to me because she was beyond middle age at that point in time. But in fact, when I think about myself, I think I see myself as being 21 as well. So it's a little bit of a shock when people see me as an older hiker, which is what I am. I heard a lot about invisibility, that sometimes younger people don't even see older people, and I experienced it on the trail. One time I was at Manzanita, some young rim-to-rim hikers ran in, and it was as if I didn't even exist. And it was a little bit shocking that they just did not see an older person as a person. Of course, I retreated back to experience, talked to them, and made them see me because I have that experience. The other thing is something I call dinosaur syndrome. The trail at Grand Canyon can get pretty busy, and I'm the world's slowest downhill hiker, but uphill I maintain a pretty good pace. But when I'm coming up and people have been resting, they'll walk right out in front of me to get ahead of the dinosaur, which can be fairly frustrating, but I guess is understandable. And finally, sometimes people ask, how old are you? And I assume they mean it as a compliment, and I'll work hard to take it as that. But they sometimes think it's fairly amazing that an older hiker is maintaining a good pace and getting the miles done at Grand Canyon. So once again, that tip, sometimes people don't see you the way you see yourself. This rock offers a good opportunity for the next point. Get the equipment you need and deserve. Shoes in particular. By the time you reach age 50, 50% of the fat on the heel of your foot has gone. The muscles weaken, the bones spread, and good shoes are essential for the older hiker. Some folks like the minimalist shoe, and that's a personal taste. For me, the maximal cushion works well to protect my feet. The more I hike and the older I get, the more I feel the rocks underfoot, and I'm looking for the protection with either a foot plate, like in the Topo Trail Venture, or a maximal cushion, like in these Olympus 5s. Also, gaiters are useful. I like the mid for an ankle support. I call it my portable ankle support. If my ankles weaken, I just tighten them up and I have an ankle brace ready to go. Get the equipment that you need and deserve. Another tip is to bring with you a small pharmacy. This has over-the-counter anti-inflammatories, stomach remedies, antihistamines, and so forth, as well as some prescription, fairly strong anti-inflammatories and pain relief medications. It's always good to have, following the philosophy of hope for the best and prepare for the worst. In honesty, all I've ever used is antidiarrheals, antihistamines, and minor anti-inflammatories like aspirin. And I've probably given more away to fellow hikers than I've used myself, but it's always good to be prepared. This is my most important tip for the older hiker. Use hiking poles. For me, it's a bit of a love-hate relationship. They slow me down, they're awkward and inconvenient, but as I age, my balance is worse and my risk of falling is higher. There is never a hike during which the poles have not saved me from an ankle twist or a fall. Hiking poles are the most important accommodation of aging, the most important tool that you can use to keep you on the trail well into your senior years. This is as good a spot as any for my next tip. And that tip is watch every step. I repeat this to myself as a mantra, especially when I start getting fatigued. One misstep, one ankle twist, it's the end of your hike, and it could be the end of your hiking career. As you age, it's more important that you watch every step. And I repeat it to myself over and over again, especially when I'm fatigued. Watch every step. Watch every step. This is where it happened. 6 weeks ago, I had my poles up and I was doing a little bit of a jog. I was competing with my younger self, turning in a good time, feeling better than I had in years. I turned back to ask my friend what time it was. I hooked a foot on this rock, fell flat on my face, rammed my knee into this rock, causing a knee injury that is still plaguing me to this day. A fall can mean the end of the hike and a painful process of getting out of the canyon. To me, when in doubt, take the conservative route. Use poles, stop before you look, and watch every step. Important hard lessons to learn. This is as good a spot as any to emphasize the importance of watch every step and also stop before you look. Because not only may a trip result in a twisted ankle or an injured knee, it could also result in a fall that kills you. One thing that's a little bit difficult with watch every step and stop before you look is when you meet an oncoming hiker, because we've been trained to look people in the eye and greet them. Unfortunately, when you do those greetings, it's a great opportunity to snag a rock and trip yourself. My tip for you is to watch your footfalls. If you're going to talk, stop and talk. Watch every step. And we made it to the Colorado River. The temperature has hit 100 on the backpack, probably 85 in the shade. Thank goodness we had the experience to prepare for this. Some thunderclouds in the distance. A bird that will be too small to show in the video, but may well be a condor. A little too far away to tell. It's a great day to hike. Heading back up to the rim, 3/4 done with the hike. There's a little bit of superstition and ceremony involved in this. I never make fun of this sign until I'm on my way back up. And you know what this fellow's name is? His name is Ralph! A couple of condors just soared by. I'm not an expert on the poles. There are plenty of videos about how to use hiking poles, but one thing I do recommend for the older hiker are these fingerless gloves. These are weightlifting gloves. I use them so that the straps on the poles don't abrade the skin on my hands, which with age has thinned a bit. The hike is over. Let me make a final point about the poles. Worst comes to worst, they can be used as a weapon. I remember meeting a bighorn sheep that was awfully intimidating one time. I was kind of glad to have them. And occasionally there are humans that are a little bit scary, and you might be able to resort to these in the worst case scenario. Finally, when you want to know who the true trail hikers are, to ask about trail conditions, look for the dust. You only get that on a long hike. The next tip may be somewhat counterintuitive and perhaps a little uncomfortable for some people, but that is to acknowledge your own mortality, or to personalize it, you are going to die. Thinking about mortality is useful to me, one, because it is the reality, and two, because if you take that coin and you flip it over, the only choice that I see is to live, to get out there and enjoy life. So acknowledging that you're going to die is a motivator to get out and do things. For me, hiking Grand Canyon is a bit of an obsession, and many people don't understand why I did it. And this is a bit personal, but 6 years ago I was diagnosed with colon cancer, almost a complete blockage of the colon, and it wasn't clear if I would live one more day, no less a week, a month, or a year. I went through surgery and chemotherapy, and there was a 10 to 50% chance I would be dead in 5 years. When I was on chemotherapy, I took the drugs for 2 weeks on, 1 week off, and at the end of that third week I would come and I would hike Grand Canyon, rim to river to rim. It was the only time I got relief, Because when I hiked, I needed to watch my footfalls, I needed to think about the hike, and I couldn't think about things like cancer and death. So for me, there is an explanation for my obsession with hiking. It's a celebration of life. It's a celebration that I'm alive, I'm able to do it, and I get out here and do it. To me, contemplating and acknowledging mortality is a motivation to keep hiking and to keep finding adventures. I hope you'll see it the same way too. My recommendation is to get out there while you can. Hiking can increase your endurance, improve your health, and add adventure to life. You are a survivor, you have experience, so go out, celebrate, and savor life. Happy hiking to you.